walks around in a black and white world. I began contemplating a more profitable line of work, like politics.
We are the show. You want to know. It's time to talk to you.
All right. All right. I thought I heard myself. All right. Sorry about the little delay there, folks. But we're good to go. Good morning. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. And good morning, Conrad. We don't have Tede flying the board today. You look marvelous.
Good morning, Joe. How are you on this illustrious day? I'm sorry. The technical problems were attributed to me watching Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, I've been mesmerized by this too. We're going to get into that. Absolutely, we're going to get into that. So, folks, sorry about the delayed start, but let's take care of some housekeeping. This is the Joe Mangiacotti Show, and we are live for the next hour until noon. And, of course, you can join the conversation here at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. You dial those digits, you're going to get into the studio. That's where Conrad's flying the board behind the glass today. He'll get you set up and into the studio here for two-way talk and conversation. Don't forget the text line. That is always running when I'm on the air, 617-297-8388. 617-297-8388. You text that like you would anybody else, folks. It appears on a screen here in the studio in real time, and we try to work it into the conversation. If you're going to send me multiple paragraphs, please just email me at joemshow@gmail.com. Text for a point or a question or something like that. And don't forget, the station does stream 24/7, like thousands of other radio stations do, to the TuneIn app. So you can take us anywhere, and that's probably one of my favorite features we have is the fact that we're on TuneIn. And I listen a lot that way. And don't forget that I do stream the show to multiple platforms for your easy listening and watching. Not that it's a big thing to watch. It's just from the studio, the Cameo Studios here. But you can watch us on the WCRN Facebook page, my Facebook page, X account, Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile, Rumble, YouTube, and also we're doing Instagram now. So multiple ways to watch and listen, and the show is turned in to a podcast when I get off the air. So that means you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So just go on like Spotify or iHeartRadio, Podbean, or any of those, and we're very good to go. So let's talk about, I'm going to set up what we can talk about. And here it is, Wednesday, July 29th. We're live till noon. And as Conrad and I were talking about, and Conrad, if you have a take on Fauci, jump in, but I'll set up the show, guys. We're going to begin with the man who spent years telling Americans to trust science. But then Congress asked him to explain the science, the decisions, and the contradictions. And Dr. Anthony Fauci decided to trust the Fifth Amendment. He's appearing in front of the Senate Homeland Security Committee this morning, right now, after being subpoenaed. They say, hey, will you come on in and talk to us? He said, no, we'll do it through the lawyers. Subpoena. Chairman Rand Paul brought him in via subpoena. Instead of answering questions about the origins of COVID-19 and the gain of function research, government records, and his own pandemic-era conduct, Fauci repeatedly has invoked his constitutional right against self-incrimination. Now, invoking the Fifth is not by itself proof of guilt. It is a constitutional protection. And we should defend constitutional protections even when they are being used by someone we may distrust. But after years of lecturing the country and dismissing questions and portraying himself as the unquestionable voice of science, remember that? If you question me, you question science, I am science. Well, the American people are entitled, in fact, to ask, what is Anthony Fauci afraid of saying under oath? We'll get into the pardon stuff, too. The question becomes even more important following Senator Paul's release of more than 1,000 pages from Fauci's private pandemic diary. When we say private, I'm going to make the distinction. I'll get into it when we drill down to this. on government servers. We didn't take or grab or hack into his personal computer or anything. This was something he kept on a government server, therefore government property. Those entries appear to reveal a very different Fauci behind closed doors from the Fauci Americans saw behind the White House podium. Remember, now in January 2020, Fauci privately wrote that the Wuhan market was not the original source of the virus. He wrote that to himself in his logs, his journal in January of 2020. He said it was merely an amplifier. He recorded an early conference call during which most of the participating scientists reportedly believed that some form of laboratory manipulation or deliberate insertion was at least possible. Yet the American public was later told that questioning a natural origin or raising the possibility of a laboratory accident was irresponsible, conspiratorial, or even dangerous misinformation. The diary also records Fauci saying that he personally convinced Mayor Bill de Blasio, that was the joke of a mayor back then at the time in New York, but he convinced him to close New York City schools. And he held similar conversations with officials working at the time for California Governor Gavin Newsom. Years later, when confronted about the devastating effects of school and business closures, Fauci challenged critics to show him a school or factory that he had personally shut down. Well, his own diary may now provide those answers, folks. It is one thing to make an incorrect recommendation during an unprecedented emergency. Human beings make mistakes, including scientists. It is something very different to privately acknowledge in one reality, publicly present another, and then deny having influenced the very policies you privately recorded yourself promoting. We're not going to examine what Fauci wrote, what Fauci told President Trump, what we told the American people, why, when we finally given the opportunity to reconcile those statements before Congress, he just chooses silence. Then, folks, we're going to turn to New York City in the approaching 25th anniversary of September 11th. September 11th, 2001. I'm pretty confident everyone listening to my voice, of course, I would have to, I guess, they have a certain age, right, Conrad? Know exactly where we were that morning. I can recall exactly what I was doing. I happened to have been picking up my sister to bring her to work. She worked for me at the time at one of the hotels we provided security for. And I was giving her a company car that day. And so I picked her up so that she could keep the vehicle. And I remember because we didn't have the radio on initially because we had business to talk about. She ran my security guards. And I finally turned the radio on, and it was to the rock station down the end of the dial. But they weren't playing music. And that old popular morning guy was talking to a contact in New York. And immediately it registered, this doesn't make sense, what's going on? And I switched to I wish I was going to say WCRN, but I switched to the big Boston news station. Did I say CNN? I meant to say, I wish I could say CRN, but I actually switched to the other big news station in Boston. And everything started to come into light. So we all remember where we were that day. But families who lost loved ones in the terrorist attacks are now asking Mayor Zohran Mamdani not to attend this year's Remembrance at Ground Zero. A petition initiated by Giovanni Galante, whose wife Grace was murdered on September 11th. Well, that has now attracted over 25,000 signatures. The organizers cite Mamdani's political associations, right? Praise of controversial religious figures in his handling of rhetoric such as globalize the intifada. globalize the intifada. Mamdani says he rejects terrorism and political violence and has announced that he intends to attend the ceremony despite the family's objections, but he won't condemn globalize the intifada. So this raises a difficult but necessary question. Who should determine the character of September 11th remembrance? The politicians who currently hold the office, or the families who buried husbands and wives and children and parents, and of course firefighters, police officers, and all of the first responders. The mayor he has the legal right to attend. He's the sitting mayor. That does not automatically answer whether attending over the expressed objections of thousands of Americans is respectful, prudent, or appropriate. We'll discuss that. And we'll also look at the increasingly bitter battle inside the Democratic Party. It's like the flesh-eating bacteria over there, guys. And all the rhetoric that would dominate the news cycle for weeks has been coming from the Republican side. Michigan Democrat candidate Abdul El-Sayed told donors that he supports challenging Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman in a future Democratic primary. El-Sayed said, ideally, you put one ogre on a pike and everyone else gets the message. Now, when he said this, he didn't use John Fetterman's name. But everybody knew who he was talking about by the derogatory term of ogre, the way he was using it there. It wasn't the lovingly Shrek ogre. But they knew who he was talking about. And when given an opportunity during Monday night's debate to apologize or lower the political temperature, El-Sayed refused. He then identified Fetterman as the target and accused him of abandoning the progressive values on which he was elected. Now, if we go back, way back to 2022, I believe isn't that when he was running? And yes, he had that stroke. And yes, I was one of the people saying at the time, maybe, this is serious medical issues that this man's having. And wouldn't the best thing to do is resign from the race, get better, take care of your health? They were so afraid, wasn't it Dr. Oz running, I think, at the time? It's never about what's best for the people. It seems on the left, what's best for the people, what's best for the candidate. It's always about the power grab or getting the power or maintaining the power. But who would have thought if we went back to 2022, and I told you that John Fetterman was going to be elected senator, and in 2025 to in 2026, he was going to be the most democratic voice of reason, the most common sense guy, the most grounded and earthly guy that they have out there as a public figure, who wasn't afraid to call out the progressive nonsense. This combining of the progressives and the socialists and the communists under the Democratic banner, I would think that the old school Democrats would be, hey, you stay. You have a Democratic Socialist Party. You run under that banner, but they're usurping the Democratic machine. And anyone who speaks up against it, they're afraid of being primaried or AOC'd, as we can refer to it. But to think that John Fetterman is considered too conservative or too right for the Democratic Party today is crazy. And he is not afraid to. He drew a line in the sand, folks, about the fact that the Democratic Party is becoming the anti-Israel party. And when that stand or the position becomes part of the platform, that is the line in the sand for him, and he's done. So Fetterman responded, and this is the other thing. I know he stutters a little bit and sometimes gets the words mixed up, but he can be a funny guy too. Fetterman responded with humor, saying he would rather be Senator Shrek than the Pontiac Platinum any day. That's kind of funny. But behind the joke is a serious question. How did a political movement that constantly warns about dangerous rhetoric become so comfortable using the imagery of placing a fellow Democrat's head on a pike? Violence comes so easy on the left, doesn't it? Finally, we're going to pause and we'll remember Senator Lindsey Graham. Yesterday, Washington said goodbye to Graham. Ceremonies at the United States Capitol and Washington National Cathedral. President Trump, Vice President Vance, members of Congress, and international leaders, right, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Ukrainian President Zelensky, gathered to honor a man who spent decades at the center of American politics and foreign policy. And today, Senator Graham will make his final journey home to South Carolina. And as we come on the air here, his remains are being carried to the South Carolina State House, followed by the procession to First Baptist Church in Columbia. An F-16 flyover by the 169th Fighter Wing is scheduled for approximately 11 o'clock, so it should have happened by now. An appropriate military tribute to a man who served for more than 33 years in the United States Air Force and Air Force Reserve, retiring as a colonel. And whether you agree with Lindsey Graham on every policy or occasionally agreed with him or frequently found yourself yelling at the television because of him, there is no denying that he was an enormously consequential figure, a fierce advocate for the military, a powerful voice in the Senate, and a man whose relationships extended from small-town South Carolina to capitals around the world. And accountability in Washington, respect for the victims of September 11th, the dangerous escalation of political rhetoric, and the passing of a major figure in American political life. We have a full hour ahead of us, so let's get started. And I want to remind folks that you can join the conversation because lines are open and available. 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. And Conrad, I'm assuming you're keeping an eye on what's happening on Fauci. Josh Howland there was going into him as was coming live on, and he decided to test this a little bit with is there a notebook in front of you and that kind of thing. And it was getting into very silly. Okay.
Yeah. And it ended with Josh Hawley basically saying to Fauci, you not speaking is actually contempt for the American people.
Yeah. And that's true. It is true because he
No audio, Joe.
Try this now. There we go. We're back.
You're back.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. On my end, usually everything's here. I had a very rare blackout last night. It doesn't happen a lot, and it wasn't long, but it seems to have, screwed a lot of things up. But let me get back on this. So, what happened this morning, right? Fauci appears before the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. It started at 8:30. I assume, Conrad, you were already at the station and had it on. And this is after he was subpoenaed by Senator Rand Paul because he invoked the Fifth Amendment and declined to answer questions, saying his attorneys advised him to do so because Senator Paul has repeatedly called for his prosecution. And because Fauci believes the hearing was designed to entrap him. Fauci continues to deny that he lied to Congress or concealed COVID's origins. Now, here's the thing, and I'm glad one of the Republicans brought this up because, again, the Democrats Don't you have constituents, I'm sure, who want these answers. And I love this. We got to look forward and all that's in the past. If there's no consequences for bad behavior in the past, there's no deterrent for bad behavior in the future, folks. How difficult is that to understand? And I don't know about you, but I remember what they did to us. You want a little taste of what communism is and where we're headed with the democratic socialists of America? Think of the height of the pandemic. Think of people ratting their neighbors and even family out. Think of how intrusive the government was. People were arrested for being in their car of a church parking lot with the window up. Remember the surfer in California? So, no. I'm certainly not going to forget, and very far from forgiving what we were put through in that time. And yes, I'm going to get into the pardon and all. But Senator Paul's release, it contained 1,141 pages of Fauci's pandemic-era diary. It covered from December of 2019 through December 2022. One clarification here. The major story over the weekend exploded in the coverage for yesterday is when it really exploded, right? So it wasn't released yesterday. It was released over the weekend, and it was released in one of those, what we call, right, in this business, the dump, or taking out the trash. And they like to release things late on a Friday or buried on the weekend because newsrooms are usually empty, especially if you're in July, right? We always joke about stories, the summer stories, because nobody's working. And it's not that there's no news, it's that there's nobody that wants to work. So they released a lot of this, and guess what? It's been given a good leaving alone by most of the major outlets. But we got to take our mid-show break here on the Wednesday edition, I almost said Tuesday, Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN. Hey, conversation, it's open for you. It's a two-way talk show here. So 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. That's how you join the conversation. Give us a call or text me at 617-297-8388. We'll take a couple minutes. We'll come back on the other side, and we'll continue with Fauci and the other things I set up on this, folks. Joe, out to the other side.
WCRN.
Time now for the forecast from the Boston Independence Group Weather Center. Call Jerry Doherty today at 877-772-1776. Retirement is within reach.
I'm Chief Meteorologist Sherry Spearn. Here's the latest Boston 25 weather on Radio 830 WCRN. We've got a soaking wet forecast for today. Weather alerts continue with areas of torrential rain expected, which is going to lead to poor visibility and flooding on local roadways. Be careful out there both this afternoon, this evening, and tonight. For tomorrow, although we still have some embedded downpours possible, showers will be much more widely scattered. I'm Chief Meteorologist Sherry Spearn. You can hear Boston 25 live for the morning drive weekdays on AM 830 WCRN.
More live and local radio is next. Stay tuned to Radio Central, 830 WCRN.
In a world as crazy as ours, isn't it nice to know there's one place you can visit for hours at a time to get a dose of reality, to find out how the other half is doing? Welcome to the radio home of Howie Carr. That's me. Visit anytime between 3 and 7 p.m. weekdays.
Businesses come in all shapes and sizes. Integrity doesn't. For more than a century, the Better Business Bureau has set the standards for how businesses should operate honestly and ethically. So when you're looking for a business you can trust, check to see who's BBB accredited and who isn't. Always choose the better business. Look for the BBB seal because it's looking out for you. That's why it's the sign of a better business. And find a better business anytime at bbb.org.
All right, folks, welcome back here to the second half of this Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN, reminding you to join the conversation at 508-871-7000. 508-871-7000. Lines are open and available. Text line 617-297-8388. Let's go to the phones. Ken's waiting patiently. Hey, Ken, seems like ages since we've talked. How you been, man?
I have been very busy.
Good.
So I'm just move right on to the topics because it takes too long to explain why. As pertains to Fauci, I think we who know so much of all the evil that he perpetrated should simply gain comfort that his day of reckoning will come. It just will come with his passing.
Yeah, he will be judged, I'm sure, later. Absolutely. But right now,
won't be exactly air conditioning where he'll be going.
No, and probably every virus ever created on the earth, I would think. Are you watching the testimony?
No, because I'm busy with work. But
yeah.
It was so obvious what he has to do. It's the only thing he could do, and obviously the media, who protected him like he was a god, are going to go out of their way to ignore that this even happened today, because they are Marxists, and we just have to teach as many people as possible how bad the news sources you have. If you're taking it from anything center left, they're Marxists and they want to destroy them.
And Ken, the media is leaving alone because they were part of this. They not only didn't question him whatsoever, and yes, folks, I'm saying the media's job is to question everybody. They don't have any problem questioning certain people. They just don't question or challenge, right? I talk about it all the time, Ken. It's like the mainstream media or legacy media has no idea what a thing called the follow-up question is. And a follow-up question can do wonders when you're talking or investigating a news story. And they didn't do any of that. And not only did they not drill down on what was being said in Fauci, who wasn't a practicing doctor in the sense that, right, he didn't have COVID patients. He's been a bureaucrat, the highest paid bureaucrat in the federal government, by the way. But the point is, they actually helped in destroying other accredited doctors, real doctors who were seeing patients, who had legitimate questions. And it's just amazing how much they fell in line with the lie in the cover-up. That's why they're afraid they want this to go away so fast. And if you said to them, this would go away if Fauci did 20 years to life for the crimes and mass murder he committed, but you wouldn't have to own up to anything. They'd say, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. And 100%.
Bottom line, Joe, we do not want to destroy the Fifth Amendment or pardon powers.
Yep.
So let him meet his maker and thereby meet his judgment. So I'm moving on to the Fetterman topic.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an interesting one. Let's go back in the elected history of John Fetterman. He was, for 12 years, the elected mayor of the small town of Braddock.
Yeah.
I think it's not much bigger than the town I left in Massachusetts, Bolton, to tell you the truth. Small town. And then ran for lieutenant governor in 2018 and earned the endorsement of Bernie Sanders. Now, I think there are many times when Bernie gets the head fake. I think the head fake was through Fetterman's wife. Fetterman's wife
is an immigrant, right? She is she Brazilian?
I don't know the detail as far as that.
Yeah, I think she's
just know
Brazilian.
she is way out on the left.
Yeah.
At least the things that she was saying while he was running for Senate in 22,
Mm-hmm.
before his stroke and after, she was very defensive of his staying as a candidate. Then he gets elected, and you know what? We don't hear from her. I don't think I've heard from her ever since. Isn't that a coincidence?
That is that's a good point to put up, because she came in, I think she's from Brazil, and then she reached out to him. She kind of stalked him. I'm just going by some interviews I saw, because they did one of those at home with the Fettermans thing, and they were sitting on the couch, and I don't remember who it was. And she was talking, and she kind of targeted him, totally targeted him, right? And developed this relationship. And after he did get elected, there was, it seemed like she was kind of pushing to maybe him take a, step back and have, is it Shapiro, right? Shapiro appoint her as senator. Conrad's saying mass legislators starting a Muslim commission. Yeah, where's the Christian commission, the Jewish commission? And the ACLU is silent about that. Thanks, Conrad. Yeah, we'll get into this with the Mamdani thing, but on the Fetterman, Ken, would you have thought in 2020? And by the way, he was lieutenant governor when the pandemic hit, right? So he was an officer. He was dealing with a lot of that stuff, but would you have thought in 2022 when he was running that he would be the voice of reason for the Democratic Party? And the other thing is, and Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, by the way. And I think this was I think I'm pointing to that and saying, why does the Democratic Party allow somebody like Bernie Sanders, who I think kind of dislikes the Democratic Party, until he and the others change it into what they want? They don't like it, but he's used the Democrats to be elected and stay in office. I think the Democratic Party should have said, register as a Democrat, or don't, or you're not going to represent the Democratic. I mean, he's pretty much the biggest spokesperson for the Democratic Party, isn't he?
His lifelong ambition is to hijack the party and make it Marxist, period.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing. And they're allowing it to be done with the DSA.
Joe, with the Fetterman, you have, as you've described, and I'll take it that you're accurate there, you've got a foreigner marrying a man whose heritage goes back to the 17th century in Pennsylvania. You see this picture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the man, after his stroke and once getting elected, once he has that power as Senate, which was way more than he'd ever had. I mean, yeah, you can be a lieutenant governor, but let's be serious. Lieutenant governor's just taking the orders of the governor. For the most part, they really don't speak their own mind. Now he's got a chance as a senator to speak his own mind, and maybe it's a stroke, or maybe it's just he never was what people thought he was. We just gauged his wife's words, and he's much different, thankfully.
Yeah. And I respect the fact that the man has, drawn that line in the sand when it comes to Israel. And I don't know if he'll jump to the Republicans or he'll go the Bernie route and be independent, but he's been warning the party, telling them don't go there. He's been criticizing them. And what does he get for that? There's been rumblings about primarying him.
Joe, let's be serious. Let's now go back to the month following his election. There were stirrings in Pennsylvania to force him out within the Democratic Party, so the governor Shapiro could replace him with another Democrat. How do you think he took that?
Yeah.
And that's probably part of a big reason why he's doing the things that he has the courage to do. Because he almost got shoved out, and he's sticking to his power, which he probably won't maintain after the next election. But he's I think, come to grips with that reality and is taking the stands that we now admire.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, final thought.
Stay tuned. Many more things coming, but I think the elections are looking pretty good because the DSA is destroying the den.
Yeah, it's you know what, and they have no problem. They're saying everything that they didn't used to say. They're saying out loud, right? They're saying the quiet part out loud now, and I say let them keep talking, right? Because when they have these spokespeople for the DSA who have no concept of what America is, how America works. They talk about eliminating the Senate and not having a president, having like I don't know, they don't even know what to call. It's absolutely ridiculous. Ken, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. All right, folks, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. There are lines open and available. And we got a text in. Parents took in the 64 World's Fair in Queens. The globe still stands. I understand. Didn't they use that in the Stark movie or something? All right. Fauci has a pardon. How can he take the fifth illegally? I thought he has to speak. Yes. Thank you, Mark, in Connecticut. I'm getting into that.
I thought the pardon only covers past actions.
Exactly. But the point is, it does cover past actions, which is why the lawyers have said to him, don't answer anything. Because
exactly, Joe, right.
If you answer something and you're on record in another way, then we have perjury that we get to contend with. And when you are granted either that they won't prosecute you or you have that pardon, right? Because sometimes that's what a DA will do. They'll give you immunity. And if you have immunity, you can't really take the fifth because whatever you say, the fifth is to not incriminate yourself. But if you can't be incriminated, then you can't take the fifth. But I did want to make the point, guys, on this log diary, of Fauci, 1,141 pages, it's being called Fauci's personal diary because of the nature of the entries. That's why it's got that label. But be clear, it was done, recordings were done in manual typed in entries were done at work and on computer, government servers and computers, not his personal property. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that his department recovered the material from the government systems. And reports show the entries were created on the government computer. So we also don't have any kind of illegal seizure here or anything like that going on, and nobody's rights were stamped on to get this diary. All right. And Kennedy says his team spent roughly 8 months recovering them across 11 government servers before turning them over to Senator Rand Paul. Now, I know this has got to be embarrassing and devastating for Fauci because he had to fight them. I mean, he was Lord of the Manor in that department and for 40 years and scattered over 11 government service. He had no reason at that time to believe this was ever going to be seen by anyone other than himself, right?
And the highest paid person in government, or I should say bureaucrat.
Bureaucrat, absolutely. Plus, he was receiving millions in these different things that he was awarded, right? Things he was awarded and praised and bestowed upon him came with, like the Nobel Peace Prize comes with, $1 million or $1.5 million. So he kept getting all this stuff. He was actually actively seeing if he qualified for it. That was coming up in the testimony. So personal thoughts, perhaps personal computer. Apparently not. These were records Fauci created in government systems, and the government eventually found them. So he can't do a foul here. All right. Government computer, government server, fact is solid. So they're in there. And Conrad, what did you say? I lost my train of thought. You made a good point. I wanted to come back to that.
Well, I was just saying, Joe, and it shocked me when the information came out that Dr. Fauci was the highest paid bureaucrat in all of the United States of America.
Yeah, he was that, and a lot of it had to do with a lot of his income too was coming from patents on viruses. And I'm thinking that, I mean, aren't you with me here, folks? Isn't there a conflict of interest? You're using government labs and assistants and scientists and everything else, and how you can personally enrich yourself from research and testing done on the American taxpayer's dime. This just doesn't sound right. And then apparently there is a law in the latter 1900s here that scientists for the government do not have to disclose any money they receive or money on patents for viruses or money they receive for anything connected to that. And that just seems like that should be revisited.
But also, Joe, Fauci was responsible for creating dozens of grants. And what he would cleverly do is pass the grant on to a specific organization, but ensure that the organization then in the next few weeks would offer a gala night where he was awarded either a monetary prize or just recognition in general in front of hundreds of people.
He also used that exact MO, guys, when the pandemic was coming out and the question about the pangolin and all that silliness, because I do remember back when this was happening, and one of the emails that came to light, it was like 1 something in the morning, and you could tell he was panicking because these 3 scientists who had been working at this wrote him an email late that evening, and he responded early in the morning, like 1 or 2 in the morning, and they said, hey, so we've been studying this, and it has all the earmarks of a lab. As a matter of fact, it is not from nature. It doesn't contain the components of that. It certainly wasn't something that could have jumping from animal to human is not an easy thing, even in Mother Nature. It takes quite a bit, and it takes incredible circumstances, and it takes time.
And the DNA markers were all systematically created, and that can be viewed.
Yes, and that was what they were saying. So, again, he did the old, here, let me give you this multi-million-dollar grant, and then you're going to re-examine this. And they did, and guess what happened? They came out with a paper saying this was most likely a jump in nature, possibly from the wet market, yada, yada, yada. We know the line, we were fed. And he goes in front of the podium or behind the podium the next day, and he points to these 3 scientists and praises their credentials and background without informing us that he has been working with them, instructing them to do this, and gave them a multi-million-dollar grant. And he acts as though they're independent scientists who just forwarded this finding or their assessment, their theses on this, to him because of NIH. And that is what first helped him get away from everybody going, well, wait a minute, gain of function. You funded this lab. He did not want the fact that he was funding, or we were funding, that lab through his direction in Wuhan. So this is how he was trying to cover the tracks way back on that point. So in March 15th of 2020, he recorded that he spoke to de Blasio, as I said in the opening, and he convinced him, and he put this in this diary, I convinced him to close New York City schools. And remember the audio, Conrad, you might remember this. Somebody leaked it out when he was having a conversation, and people were saying, yeah, people aren't going to go for this. shutting this down, staying away, requiring all this stuff. And he said something to the effect, in his words, his on the tape or the recording, and we don't use tape anymore, right? But he was on the recording saying, yeah, when you start taking their jobs away, they'll fall in line real quickly.
Yes.
You remember that? This is an evil person. He's incarnate of evil. I mean, he's like the mad scientist from the Marvel magazines or something. So he's bragging to himself in his love fest in this diary, because we don't have time, but he really got into the celebrity aspect, right? I mean, he kept putting in, I talked to Barbara Streisand today, and he actually, and I guess this is a gray area because he put a medical thing she had on her thighs or buttocks or something. She wasn't his patient, so the HIPAA doesn't apply, but it was extremely unethical on a zillion levels. But it's out there. So that, unfortunately for Barbara Streisand, it's very embarrassing. But he kept talking about, they were calling him the sexiest man alive, and this one talked to me, and so called me. I mean, we're in the middle of a world pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen since the Spanish flu. And this guy is more concerned with the celebrity that comes with what's going on than maybe getting to work on this. And it was in the same entry, he talks about California's, Gavin Newsom's chief of staff told Fauci that based on Fauci's television appearances and what he said, and I go back to those 3 scientists, and they got bought off with the grant, Newsom decided to close California schools, bars, and restaurants, except for, of course, the French Laundry when he wanted to go there. And Fauci wrote that he advised de Blasio to close restaurants and bars, and that de Blasio said he would rely on Fauci's recommendation. 5 days later, when de Blasio was considering a shelter-in-place order for the city, Fauci wrote that he advised him to go ahead and proceed with that. And then he tries to tell us he didn't close anything down. Then on March 29th of the same year, he wrote that the administration had wanted him to end the initial mitigation period. But he wrote, we convinced him, meaning President Trump, to extend the mitigation measures to 30 days. Remember the spread that they fed us in the beginning? And then in November of 20, Fauci recorded agreeing to support Los Angeles officials seeking a 3-week shutdown. But compare that with Fauci publicly. Because in 2022, Fauci told The Hill that he didn't recommend locking anything down. Yet he's bragging to himself in his own diary that he did, convinced them and persuaded them. And that these governors, as simple-minded as they might be, were making those decisions based on him being on television. He also pushed back against the claim that he was responsible for closing schools, saying he had nothing to do with it. During congressional testimony in 24, he said, I did not close the schools. Now, I guess you could say in his defense, Fauci did not pass legal, or rather possess the legal authority to order the mayor of New York or the governor of California to do anything. Those elected officials made the actual decisions, but like most politicians, they look to, and in this case, he's a government employee. He's a government scientist. And the media was doing their part, as well as Meta, and don't forget that the former Twitter and all them, what they did to real doctors. I'm not implying that Fauci's not a real doctor. He is a real doctor, but he's not a practicing doctor. He's not a Dr. Siegel seeing COVID patients. But they took everything he said to be gospel. But that's not the real interesting thing here, right? The question is whether he recommended and advocated the closures. And his contemporaneous diary says he did. So my distinction, Don't say. Look, Fauci personally ordered every school closed. No, he didn't do that. Fauci may not have had the legal authority to close the schools, but his own diary says he urged elected officials to do it. And that's very different from saying he didn't recommend lockdowns. Lied about all of that. Yeah. And this is the other one, folks, man, the mortality rate discrepancy. Because he knew. And this one could produce a very good discussion for us here, guys. Not that we have the time, but we have tomorrow. Because in February, on the 8th, a matter of fact, of 2020, Fauci recorded a conversation with former CDC Director Tom Frieden. Fauci wrote that he believed the denominator, the actual number of infected people, was substantially larger than confirmed cases suggested, meaning the case fatality rate might be roughly 0.2% to 0.3% rather than the 2%. That's in that private conversation. Then on March 11th, Fauci testified before Congress that the stated mortality rate was about 3%. This is a little over a month later. He knows it's about 0.2%, although he acknowledged undetected, minimally symptomatic and asymptomatic cases would bring it down. His estimate to Congress was roughly 1%, which he characterized as about 10 times deadlier than the seasonal flu. In private, he said it's a bad flu. Private discussion, 0.02. Public congressional estimate, 1 month later, 1%. I'll stay ahead of the fact checkers here. A month in March, right, 2020 was an eternity in terms of incoming COVID data. A month back then, guys, was a very long time. We were all in a panic. We were all waiting for information. Estimates changed daily, hourly. Populations being studied changed. Case fatality rate and infection fatality rates aren't necessarily identical concepts. So that was a long time. And to have that discrepancy is huge, I think. But we're running out of time here for the Wednesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN. Reminding folks every Wednesday, Thursday, 11 to noon. Don't forget the show is turned into a podcast. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And that could be iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podbean. Check it out. Or just go to joemangishow.com. That's joemangishow.com. Just like you can follow me at Joe Mangi Show. Same thing, folks. That will wrap it up. Have a fantastic day. See you back here tomorrow at 11 a.m.